Yeah, yeah. Unashamed, unafraid. I'm trying to walk the walk. Truth on the mic, no shame here, just real talk. Came from the outside, never fit in. Now we tell the story and the healing begins. No front, no mask, just telling the truth. Keep it real, keep it raw, speaking straight from the booth. If you feeling like an outsider, this one's for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to another episode of Unashamed, Unafraid. We are unashamed of sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing. Austin, this is the first time you've co-hosted with me. You've been on a couple Unashamed or Live Unashamed episodes. How does it feel to be in the hot seat, brother?
Dude, just excited to be in the big leagues now. I'm excited that you trust me enough to finally sit in front of this mic and talk.
No, the trust was always there. Well, dude, let's check in on recovery. How are things going for you?
Things are going well recovery-wise. You know, it's always messy. Recovery is a messy business, but the thing that I would say that I'm struggling with the most with my recovery is things are going good. And this is the first time things have actually gone good for a significant period of time. And I'm honestly struggling how to connect with God when things are going good and not when I'm just in crisis. Like that's something I'm trying to explore right now and figure out, because I'm not in crisis mode. And that's a weird feeling to have.
It almost feels wrong.
It does. It does.
And you've been sober now how many months?
I believe I'm at 7 months.
Just a disclaimer, if you've never listened to the podcast before, we do not believe that sobriety is equal to recovery.
Correct.
But sobriety is the eventual goal. I would say, in all things considered, my recovery feels like it's going well today too. I had a really good conversation with someone very close to me who I needed to have a conversation with in terms of boundaries, and that went as well as it could have. I was really proud of myself. I guess I realized in the middle of that conversation how much I had healed. The fact that I felt like I could have a voice and I could list concerns that I had about the way we were interacting with this individual and what needed to change in our relationship. That is something I wouldn't have done 3 years ago. I would have just stayed small. I wouldn't have brought anything up. I would have got passive aggressive and resentful, and then I would have gone and watched porn.
What a beautiful cycle.
And so I was just proud of myself, man. Like the progress I'm making. Sure, I'm still only getting, a couple weeks sober, but I'm having some pretty impressive wins that to me feel very sacred, and that's good. So that's enough from us. I want to introduce our guest. We have Erin from familiesgettinghelp.com. She's a hypnotherapist, and she does specialize in pornography recovery and addiction recovery. So Erin, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sam and Austin. Really look forward to a great conversation. Hopefully discovering some interesting things. I'm definitely curious to hear what you've learned about hypnotherapy. We'll get into that maybe later. But I am a hypnotherapist, clinical hypnotherapist, and a master hypnotist as well. I've been doing hypnotherapy for about 10 years, and I love it. I love it because people change really quickly. We get some really powerful results. Just this morning got a message from a client, and she just said, it's only been a week since my first session. And she's like, it's actually kind of shocking to even begin to think that I've seen this many changes. She's like, I almost think it's some kind of magic or, something like that, but it's really not. We really get into the deep changes of the brain. We'll talk more about that today, I'm sure. But it is something I'm totally passionate about, helping people change. And I've really always been a person who connects easily with others. That aspect of the job is absolutely amazing. But I grew into this position eventually through doing different things. I got into some, energy work. I would say that has its place and whatever. But it's definitely not a method that's going to get you unstuck. For me, I started to get back into actually therapy and was going back to school to be a therapist, and came across this modality because someone introduced me to it and said, hey, you've got to try this. you're going to put therapy down in 2 seconds. And they were totally right, because in that session, changes happened in my brain that I just couldn't even, I couldn't even figure out how that happened that quickly. And then 6 months later, I still noticed like a difference. So not that regular therapy doesn't have its place, but I'm a very intuitive person. And so for me, hypnotherapy, I get to feel the spirit all day long, every day. It's an amazing thing. And I get to touch in with that spiritual side of myself and, utilize it to help other people. There's really nothing better. A little bit more about me. I have 2 twin daughters. They are 21 years old and just are about to become seniors in college. Very excited for them. They're awesome. They're amazing. I get to barely see them a little bit this summer. And then I have a pet that's a little bit different than most people's. I have a cockatoo. So she kind of runs the household
bird?
sometimes. Yeah. So one of
It's a
those
big
big
old
white
parrot.
parrots,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the little fluffs on top of the heads. So that's kind of my life and work. I love what I do.
Does the cockatoo, do those speak back like a parrot?
Yes, she will speak back, but cockatoos aren't the best talkers. They're very cuddly, very personable. She will
Mm.
literally just sit in your lap all day if she could have her way. But
Wow. That's rad.
yeah. So yeah. So that's a little bit about me.
So Erin, tell us why you decided to go into the pornography addiction recovery world.
It came across my platform, or on my desk, I should say, in a kind of an unusual way. I had someone show up in my office and just say, "Hey, have you ever thought about starting a program for this?" Essentially. And I really hadn't too much, which is kind of interesting because I went to a hypnotherapy school with a guy. The guy who owned the school, his name was Dennis Parker. And Dennis, he had this whole program in hypnotherapy for helping people quit porn. He loved to help guys clear that off of them and feel like they could really shake it and be done with it. And he felt like he had a really solid list of protocols, which he taught us all. And I knew how to do it, but going into my hypnotherapy world, I really didn't focus on it at first. And it was maybe a couple years ago, someone brought this to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought of it?" And I was like, "Well, I have all the tools. I have the program." Dennis has passed away, but before he passed, he actually reached out to his students and just said, "Hey, I'd love for you to continue this program." And I kind of put it in the back of the files of my mind. But for me, I had a little bit of a struggle with porn when I was a teenager. It was something that happened, I saw it on my family's computer. I was just doing, surfing the web, and curiosity evoked feelings, right? And that's just kind of a natural thing that happens, is it evokes feelings. And back then, this was like 1995, 1996. Nobody's talking to their kids about like, what if you run into porn on the internet? So back then it was shocking, the curiosity. And of course it brings all those feelings that just are there because biologically they're going to be there. Right. And had someone told me what to do with those feelings, I would have probably been good to go and just walked away. But for most of us, when we show up in that situation, we don't know what those feelings are about. So we come back to it again because it brings a spike of dopamine. And that's definitely what happened to me. And I got stuck in a loop with it for maybe a year or so, and finally had an experience where I felt the spirit speak so strong to me, and it was all so clear. And it was something that for me, I just kind of realized I didn't want any of this in my identity. I really felt that connection to God, to Christ in that moment, and recognized that there was a loving Heavenly Father who also wasn't judging me for this. And I think that was a very unique experience to have at that time. But that did take a lot of the shame out of it for me. And taking the shame out of it for me, then I could see, oh, this is just something that I kind of got trapped into, stuck in, the emotional stuff that was taking away some of the stresses of life. And I didn't even know it because I was a teenager. So all of that was there, definitely, and something that I've gone through in my life.
You talk about the shame and how you were able to have a pretty powerful experience that redirected you. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what role does shame play in pornography use? I mean, as you've worked with clients, how do you see that interacting, and why does it make it so difficult to overcome?
Well, the shame cycle, it's introducing a pretty negative chemical concoction into our bodies. And if we already know that porn makes us feel better, which we consciously may not say that to ourselves at 11 or 12 or 14 or whenever it is that we're first exposed to porn. We have the whole spike of dopamine that's there, and we subconsciously recognize that automatically. There's actually a reason for that too. Like the chemical concoction that's sitting there has no base and no foundation of oxytocin and the serotonin that you would get if you were having the love bonded chemical connection that you get during a release of committed, loving, companion, eternal type of sex experience. So that actually aids in that feeling, that negative chemical sensation that happens. And then immediately, if that starts to sit in the body for long enough, immediately the body starts to recognize, it'll start to send signals to the brain. Well, I want that better feeling to make that go away. So it definitely keeps you locked in the cycle because it becomes one of the other reasons that you feel bad in life. And you already felt bad in life for some other reasons probably. So it just kind of gets added in there.
I have zero experience with hypnotherapy altogether. And like I saw on the docket that we're interviewing this hypnotherapist today, and all of a sudden in my mind, the first thing that comes to my mind is like a man in a top hat with a twisty mustache with a watch saying like, "You're getting very sleepy," which I know it's not. And so
exactly,
for like me and the listeners who are unfamiliar with hypnotherapy, like if I was coming to you for a first session of, I want to stop looking at porn, like what would that look like?
So when you're coming into a session, what we're going to do first, we have an evaluation system where I'm definitely taking a pulse on your personality and some of the things that you may struggle with already. Because we specialize in quitting porn, we're going to ask you a series of questions essentially at the very beginning just to get to the bottom of, okay, what's really driving this? There's just a series of protocol questions that I have that we go through. And once we feel like we really have that problem locked and underway, that's when we're going to start a session. And I definitely have never waved a watch at anyone ever. And we haven't done anything like that in there. There's no, you're getting very sleepy, but it's just kind of a nice light meditation that I lead people into to begin with, because that's what we're looking to do is just take people from these really quick running beta waves that we're in and then begin to relax into our alpha, which is where you'd be if you're like watching a movie and feeling some emotion, feeling any kind of connection there, and you're becoming more programmable in that state. Then we pass down through that deep meditative state into what we call theta. And getting down into theta, that's where we can really do some big changes. You're in a place where you're in a half sleep kind of place. So you're never going to be asleep. No one's going to have mind control over you. You would have to want them to have mind control over you for that to happen. Really, it's a place where you can figure out that problem, where it came from, and then solve it. And so for a lot of people, we have an emotion that's really driving the porn issue. And it could be the emotion of shame, because sometimes shame's been sitting around for so long that it becomes part of our identity. And we have like a belief system that says, I'm always this way, or I will, we almost label ourselves as a porn user. And when we start to label ourselves as a porn user and we connect all that shame that's in there, we keep bringing ourselves subconsciously back around to it again and again. So we're going to, boil that emotion down, whether it's shame, whether it's anger, because for some people, that feeling of anger that they're having to stifle all the time causes them to reach out for porn. Or for some people, it's boredom, right? So whatever the emotion is that seems to stimulate it, and a lot of us, if we've been using porn for a while, then we probably have different emotions that stimulate it. So we want to kind of attack those different emotions. We're going to ask the subconscious, where'd this come from? And it usually is something that happened when, we were younger, before we're 6 or 7. That's when our primary neural pathways form.
So Erin, I've got a question before we go any further. Tell me a little bit more about, you said you're talking to the subconscious and you're asking it questions. Mm-hmm. Can you walk me through what that looks like? I mean, I'm assuming that this is based on the assumption that a lot of the reason why we use porn is because there's shame, there's deep core beliefs that are locked deep inside our subconscious, and you're trying to lift those, right?
Correct.
So how would
Correct.
you do that?
So yeah, it's a great question. And essentially, we're literally going to lock onto a feeling, and I basically ask my client to really focus on this feeling. Once we can see this is the problem. We've talked it out consciously. We can pretty much agree we've got these different emotions that are stimulating this particular porn problem. Plus we have the tests that they've taken as well that they're probably also resonating with what, is going on there. So we're going to go into that, meditative state like we're talking about. We get down into theta. Once we're there, our ego can kind of take a little bit of a vacation. And as our ego starts to lighten up a bit, we can start to see the reality of things so much more easily. But what we'll do is focus on that particular emotion, and then we'll say, okay, where was this created in the brain? Because there's a place where this happened before that person was 6 or 7 years old or so, and that's where those primary neural pathways formed. And I'm not saying that this is like where we first looked at porn, but this is where like one of those emotions that seems to be stimulating porn is coming from, right? So we're going to figure that out and find where that first started and see other places where maybe it linked to, because it doesn't necessarily need to be like a big trauma where it first started. It could be because some of us go through big traumatic situations. But others of us maybe just had a moment where we did something as dumb as, drop our ice cream cone on the ground and our brother calls us a dummy, and we feel that shame, right? In that moment. And that's where we first start to associate shame or something like that with ourselves. So what we'll do is find, okay, where'd that piece come from? Why did the mind do that? Oh, because we were only 5 or 6 years old and we had no reinforcement inside our mind to say, oh, that's not true, right? We had nothing inside of us to bounce that back out, but now we do. And so what we're doing, and if we take a scan of the brain before we do a hypnotherapy session, and some universities are studying hypnotherapy more and more, which is awesome. And I love that. But if we take a scan of the brain and we ask the person to think of this memory that that was traumatic, and we see how the neural pathways are formed in that area, okay, great. We do the session. What happens is when we access that memory and we just have different emotions, new ideas introduced, new thoughts, when we're in that theta wave state, we get about 400 times the conscious thinking mind's power. So we're making changes about 400 times the rate that you would in a normal therapy session. You're integrating that so much deeper, so much more quickly. After the session, we go take another brain scan. We actually see a change. The neural pathways look different. And the ones that were there and they become different, they're smaller, or we see a completely different shape going on in that area. So kind of cool. That new thoughts and new emotions, new ideas create new realities for us inside of our minds. We can think about ourselves so differently. Then we're not carrying an old shame piece around anymore. You can see if you ask someone to think of something, right, it lights up that area of the brain. So you see the neural pathways there, you see the formation, you do the hypnotherapy, you come back, and yes, you ask for that memory to be lit up. But now it has different feelings with it. The neural pathways are different. We think of it differently. My clients think of it differently. They're no longer carrying that shame around. And it's really, really powerful when we can go back and go, well, where was the first time this person was ever introduced to pornography? And they were like 8 or 9. And there was curiosity, right? Because that's going to be there. And there might have been like feelings that started to show up that were sexual or exciting. And that's like so normal. But at 8 or 9, they might have started to think, and we, maybe started to think, I'm a bad person. I am always going to be attracted to these gross things. That seems to show up a lot for people. And if we can just go back and go, oh, I wasn't a bad person. This was just like a normal response that I was having there. And now that I can see it so differently, it has so much, the power just leaves from it. And then porn also, the power leaves for the person in their older adult life. So it's kind of cool because it's so reciprocal and unifying for us, because we also get to connect back with those parts of ourselves where we kind of stuffed them down because we felt so bad. And so it's like we lose a piece of ourselves at 7 years old or at 10 or 12 or, these different places. What I'm saying? Do I sound like a crazy person or?
Well, no, I
No.
like what you're saying, Erin. That really matches up with the way that I guess I've interpreted my own story. I mean, I feel like especially before the age of 10, I had these experiences that were very formative for me, and they really set a template for the way I thought about relationships, sex, myself,
Mhm.
for the rest of my life. God as well, I would put in that category, right? And I think it's powerful what you're talking about. So I'm interested to hear about the reprogramming process, because I mean, how do you just in a moment go back and have such a powerful force on something that's been so ingrained for so long?
Yeah, so that is that one of the things that I mean, that's what a hypnotherapist does essentially. So we're going to take that moment and then we let that really begin to expand in the brain because again, ego lifted off, right? So now we don't have all the judgments about ourselves that we used to. Now we can start to see ourselves probably a little more, I think, like our Heavenly Father sees us. And when we start to do the protocols that I use, we allow the brain to experience what that feels like at, 8 years old to feel clear and feel innocent and, feel pure again. And so that's a cool new feeling. But now because of that, we probably didn't feel the innocence and the purity and the, all of that for so long as an adult, right? And all the way growing up. So essentially, and just to kind of give you one of my tricks of the trade, what I do is I basically help the client I'm working with go from that place and imagine being clear, pure, all the wonderful things that they would have been all the way up through today. And as we're doing that, again, we're beginning to make big changes, not only in the brain, but neurosomatically in the body, because we're just dumping out all these really great chemicals into the body. So the body's beginning to sense what it feels like to integrate this on such a different level. And then we're giving, kind of prompts and cues to imagine what the future is going to be like so that when you step into that future, your neural pathways are already primed to be like, oh, I still feel pure here. I still feel clear here. I still feel good here. I still am able to choose into this because I identify with myself that way so much more than I did before. And it doesn't mean that it's going to make it like perfect right away. That's why I usually, suggest we're going to work 3, maybe 4 sessions with someone. But ultimately, I get a lot of clients who are on one session because of that neurosomatic integration and all the visioning that they get to do, which we call future pacing in hypnotherapy. But because of all of that, yeah, they have a lot more power when they step into that place. But they have a lot more power because they remember that power inside themselves. And that's something that I think is hard to teach and hard to get through in therapy. But if we can just like tap back into it in a second, man, sometimes it can make such a huge impactful difference. And then, you might have the temptations that were there before. But one of the other things we get to do in hypnotherapy is run those temptations and run them in a way that, and imagine them going in a different way. So you're building new neural pathways for how that's going to go very quickly.
What do you mean when you say run those temptations?
Yeah, right. I'm speaking like a hypnotherapist. We're going to imagine what's it going to feel like after we've connected with these pieces of ourselves that we've maybe left behind for so long. What's it going to feel like when a temptation shows up? What's it going to feel like when you've been doing so great for so long and all of a sudden it shows up and it, sneaks up on you? And you get to imagine that when you're deep in your theta wave state, again, doing all the programming for yourself, creating these new neural pathways there. And that way, again, you step into that place in the future and you feel more prepared. And we will run a lot of different scenarios so that you feel as prepared as you possibly could.
What I'm loving hearing so far is that, in layman's terms, like you're addressing the true cause of addiction. You're not focusing on the behavior. Don't bring your phone in the bathroom anymore, and don't do this, and maybe you should sing a hymn or read the scriptures more, or like you're not focusing on the behavior. You're focusing on the emotional underlying problem of why we needed that addiction in the first place, and allowing your clients to start to face it and focus and sit in it, which I love. That's amazing. One thing that I am curious about is it's gotten really popular in psychotherapy within the past 5 to 10 years, but things like EMDR, ART, these rapid eye movements, how is that comparative to hypnotherapy? Are they similar? Is it not similar at all? How does that, I guess, compare?
It's a really good question, and they are a bit similar in that EMDR, you're getting that bilateral stimulation, right? So as you get that bilateral stimulation, it starts to relax you, and you're going to go from those beta waves into your alpha waves. So you're not going to go into theta there, generally speaking, with your eyes open. Most people are not going to go into a theta wave state, but they're going to get into a nice relaxed space where, again, ego starts to diminish just a little bit and all the fears that were there begin to diminish just a little bit. Hypnotherapy is similar that way. When it comes to EMDR and those kinds of therapies, though, you kind of need to know what the issue was ahead of time when you go to that session. When it comes to hypnotherapy, you can show up and literally go, I have no idea. I had a perfect life. My background was awesome. There's nothing I can possibly point to where this is coming from, but it's been there for this long or whatever, right? And hypnotherapy can help you find the root of the problem pretty fast. Because again, we're going to ask the brain, and maybe I didn't speak to this very well before, Sam, but we're going to ask the brain, where did that emotion come from? Essentially, once we get into that theta wave state, and you'd be surprised how fast your brain comes up with the right answer.
So I'm gonna dive in here a little bit because you and I, you might remember this. We talked on the phone a little bit about this when we were discussing coming on the podcast, but I've actually done some hypnotherapy. And what I think one of the most helpful things was about it was what you just discussed, which is it's shocking how fast you can actually get to the root of the problem. I could identify probably 3 beliefs that were driving my porn addiction. Number 1 was I thought that I was a bad kid, and I was doing everything that I could to find a good version of myself through porn. Number 2 was felt like I was really incompetent, and so I had these feelings of like I have to escape and get out of this world into a place that feels safe, right? Sex is very powerful for that, and so I went to porn for that as well. And then the third thing, and you mentioned this earlier, was I'm bored. And I never learned how to deal with boredom as a kid. I was so bored all the time. Sunday afternoons, we couldn't do anything. We had 6 kids in our family. I didn't feel like I had enough of the attention of either one of my parents, and I was always bored. And so what I took from hypnotherapy more than anything else was like, I went in and I was able to be like, yeah, okay, this is exactly where to go from here. And then I worked backwards. And so I love that piece.
Yeah, I love that too. The idea of that you don't need to know. Because like having gone to so many like men's retreats and being in recovery circles for so long, talking to men where they're like, I don't know why I'm addicted. Or some can be like, this moment right here, I was abused, and this is where it all started. Where so many others are just like, I was never abused. I had great parents. I don't have this traumatic life. And so then usually the answer is like, you have all these tiny T traumas that eventually built up into the need for an addiction. But that is so much harder to try and break down and try and figure out, and to have a tool that can start to dissect that without you having to know what each one is. That's big. That's a big thing for a lot of people to have a tool like that.
And from my own personal experience, so if anyone out there is wondering, like, what is hypnotherapy? Like I was fully in control of myself when I was hypnotized. I just felt very calm and like very myself, more myself than I ever had been. It was the same feeling I remember having when I was probably in 7th grade, and I just remember dribbling the basketball down the court in a basketball game and being so in flow. Like my brain was just working and I didn't even have to think about it. My hypnotherapist asked me a series of questions, and suddenly like this phrase and this moment in time came to my mind. And I was like, I hadn't ever really realized the gravity of that situation and what was said to me and how I interpreted it. But it was like, bingo. That is a critical moment that I've totally overlooked my whole life. So I just testament to that. It's very fascinating. Here's a question you'll appreciate. So would you tell us a little bit more about the effectiveness of hypnotherapy? Because from my own research and from the claims of many hypnotherapists, especially in the pornography recovery world, it's extremely high, like 90+% after just sometimes less than 4 sessions. I'd love for you to speak to me as someone, because I did do some hypnotherapy and it was very helpful. I thought it was very therapeutic. It helped me a ton in my recovery, but I didn't get sober in the way I had expected. And the way, what is it that you're pairing with the hypnotherapy that's causing the real results? Because I'm sure there's things I was missing, if this is really that effective, that I probably just either wasn't aware of, maybe at that point in my recovery wasn't willing to do, or a mix of both of those two.
About 90% or so of clients across the board tend to feel like they were able to get over whatever problem they
Sure.
had, get over whatever behavior was holding them back or emotion, and step into a new phase of life where they had more control, where they had more power, and they didn't feel like that old thing was the thing that was in control. Instead, they were. Studies show that most people find meaningful change within 3 to 6 sessions. In my office, my clients usually see change between 1 and 6 sessions. Some of that has to do with how deeply rooted the unwanted behavior or emotion is, and some of it has to do with how ready the person is for change, because we're ready for what we're ready for. And our readiness is dependent on maturity. And of course, I'm not talking about like age, but emotion wise and personal responsibility wise. And I know for me, in my therapy process, my very first session was for anxiety I was having due to divorce trauma. And I'd been working in therapy for maybe 3 or 4 years at that point, and it was still at that like 9 or 10 level most of the time. And it took me from like a level 10 panic attacks and anxiety that I couldn't even recognize where they were coming from, down to like a 3 or a 4. So once I did hypnotherapy, like I said, that first experience was great. And it really did take it to this manageable space for me. And I would still say I was probably one of those clients in the 90% saying this was successful. Not like it got rid of everything, but this was successful because it got me to a place where it was manageable, right? And then as I kept working, of course, I'm in the hypnotherapy world, and I start to see literal miracles in front of my eyeballs. And yes, I get to play a small role in that, but I know what's really happening is my clients' minds are so ready for change, and they're also in a place where they believe change is going to happen for them. And that kind of belief, it really does do something different inside of us. And when a client is so ready to change and they also feel the responsibility inside of themselves, that's when things kind of click for people in a really, really, really powerful way. And I started recognizing, well, if I want my that 3 or 4 level of anxiety to go away, then I probably need to be adapting some of these thoughts, this belief system, that it really, really can. And also, I would say that in that time period, I was finally able to start recognizing, if I want to adapt that and I want this change, there's something I have to let go of. And the thing that I had to let go of was feeling like anyone else had brought me to this point and I didn't have control. I recognized that it was my responsibility to step into a safe world and to be safe inside of myself, which I think is what Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ want us to do. They are leading us to a place where we know how to step out of something ourselves. They can come lift us out at any point, but we've got to take that final step. So, to speak to some of that, yes, I would say that part of it was I needed to do the work. But one of the things that made the huge difference was I had a different hypnotherapist as well. So I was different, but also I do think that that combination, the time for me to take the responsibility, the time for me to change, and then the new hypnotherapist who had some more tools under his belt, essentially. And I think a different, just more powerful belief system helped me to also change my belief system. So, I mean, there really is something to be said for feeling comfortable with your therapist and knowing that they're good at what they do. A hypnotherapy session is a team effort. I've got to be knowledgeable. I've got to be tuned in as a therapist. I've got to be paying attention to your physical and verbal cues. But like I said, you've got to be ready. And the more these two pieces come together, the faster that change is going to happen. It's very important for us to not only clear out what we worked on, like we were talking about before, but be able to step into these new spaces where we see ourselves differently, where we can feel ourselves making a change. And that neurosomatic experience is something that I really lean into during a hypnotherapy session with my client, because I want my clients to feel when the neural pathway change is happening, because chemicals are dumping into the body. And we get this really amazing ability to not only be in that theta wave state and make those neural pathway changes really fast, but also because the chemicals are dumping into the body and we keep promoting that as a therapist and as a client together. Now we're really starting to get some experience with what that's like, and the neural pathways are getting really nice and deep and strong. And that might need to be reimpressed for a few days after the session. I think it's great to keep reimpressing that for weeks and even months, because now you're starting to really live in that space. It's becoming part of life.
That feels very consistent with
Yeah.
my experience in recovery right now. There's a lot of things that maybe I unlearned, but I never learned the new thing, right? And so that I just where there was a void there, I drifted back and have many times to kind of the old way, the old neural pathway that was, maybe not fully formed.
With hypnotherapy and specifically focusing on porn addiction and recovering from that, like what tools are you able to give your clients so they can use, not when a session's happening, when they're at home and when those urges actually hit?
That is a really good question. So I'm glad you asked, because yes, in this hypnotherapy process, we have these bottom-up approaches, but we also give you tools that are top-down approaches. So in a moment where you are dealing with an emotion or a temptation that would typically get to you, I want you to be able to utilize these top-down techniques so that you have that kind of power to change how you feel at any time, anywhere. So bottom up is when we start with your deeper beliefs and identity. Instead of just trying to change your behavior, we work on how you see yourself at a core level. For example, if you believe I'm a terrible person who's always going to give in to temptation, that belief lens creates emotions, thoughts, and behaviors that match it. That negative identity flows up and affects pretty much everything in life. And it just keeps affecting us because we tend to behave the way we feel. So when we start to shift your beliefs, so you start seeing yourself as someone with potential, someone who's capable of choosing better, and that really starts to ring true with you, those new emotions and thoughts and behaviors will naturally flow up. Bottom up is going to be those one-on-one sessions that you will have with your hypnotherapist. And then we also have some recordings for you to listen to for different emotions that you get to work on and have some very deep perspective shifts, even on your own. The top-down techniques that we use and promote here in our program, some of the tools are things like, those affirmations, things that are going to ring true with you, new thoughts and ideas that we would love for you to put some emotion and connection to help support where you're going. And those can be really helpful in a moment when you're feeling temptation. However, we like to pair it with some other things as well. So you get some neurosomatic work. We definitely do different types of EFT tapping where we also bring in affirmations. There's that. And we also teach you how to do some breath work. And that's to bring you back to center and to be able to connect internally. Again, a top-down approach that starts to spread down into your system. And one of the things that I absolutely love to do is to teach people how to turn down an emotion that's unwanted or a temptation. One of our most fun top-down approaches is called automatic impulse control. And this technique was developed by my former instructor, Dennis Parker. He actually became pretty well known in the hypnotherapy world for this in the few years right before his passing, because it's such a unique somatic tool. So here's how it works. Now, we have these different parts of our brain that are active at different times, depending on where our intelligence is inside of our mind. We have a spiritual intelligence that has been there always with us in our spirit mind. And as we inherit this body that we get, our spirit mind is going to work with our physical mind. And that spiritual intelligence roams around inside of our brain as we have different thoughts. If we are in our quick running beta thoughts, then we're thinking in this part of our prefrontal cortex. Now, science probably wouldn't agree with me as far as that intelligence term goes. I think one day they definitely will. We do know that as you think about things consciously, you're up here running in these beta waves. As we start going back, we go further and further into our imagination until we get back to a place where it almost would pretty much take us to sleep if we put our intelligence there. And that's actually one of the ways that I teach people to sleep. And what's kind of cool is you play around with where your intelligence is. you start to be able to figure out how to change your emotions. Now, here's the memories running front to back. And I know you guys probably can't see me on this recording, but I'm touching my forehead and just kind of moving back along, just back along the center of my head until you reach the nape of your neck. Now, what Dennis figured out is that actually there is a side to side motion. And when we go back and forth that way, can alter how a memory is perceived. So if we think about a particular memory in our mind, something that is not a neutral memory, maybe a pornographic image, even, or perhaps something like we got in a fight with our spouse and we're feeling really angry, really upset. Well, we're going to close our eyes and think about how angry and upset we are. As you think about how angry and upset you are, if you're really paying attention, there's going to be like kind of emotion inside of your head. And that's where your intelligence is landing. So as you think about how angry and upset you are, go just kind of point where that place is to yourself on your head. And then from there, what's kind of cool, if you take that emotion and you keep your intelligence there with your finger, you can just move your finger down the left side of your head. And what you'll do is say things that counter that particular emotion. So anger, you're not me. Anger, you're not helpful. I don't want anything to do with you. Anger, you're not supporting me. You're just making it more difficult for me to be competent, intelligent, and rational right now. Anger, I'm turning you off. Goodbye. So what you're doing is turning your just
So explain that verbally for anyone who's listening and not watching, because that's fascinating.
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Let me be more clear. As you're saying this, you're going down the side of your head, the left side of your head, as you're saying these counter statements, essentially, down the side of your head about 1 inch.
So you're doing this while you're running your left hand down the side of your head.
Yeah. And you're just going to keep moving your finger down with those statements until you get down to the bottom of your ear. And that's when you need to say, goodbye, you're gone. And see how you feel there. If you start and you're like, anger's at a level 8, and you start moving that down that side with those affirmations, when you finish, I want you to ask yourself what level your anger is at. Because maybe it's not going to be at a 0 there. It may be, but I guarantee it moved down and you're more rational now, because anger puts us into that place inside of our minds where we're not being rational. And now you're more logical and more clear, and you're going to be able to think through whatever this disagreement is so much more easily.
So, and all that stuff just affects your mind. It just kind of helps you almost subconsciously. It kind of softens your brain up and reprograms it.
Yes. On the flip side, we have a positive emotion. We want to turn it up. We can do it the other way. So you're going to take that thought that's positive and you're just going to do the same thing. Move it down 1 inch as you continue to go down the right side of your head now with positive affirmations. If we had an old belief lens that was making us feel incompetent, then we're going to start saying things like, I know that I'm capable. I know that I'm intelligent. I know that I can learn. I have continued to learn in my life, and I am competent.
So kind of like a guided meditation of sorts.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll notice the number on that also starts to increase.
Sure.
You'll get until you're level 10 in competence.
Yeah, I love the use of somatic work, of actually using your hand and moving it down and pointing and moving it down that way. I mean, for many reasons. One, you're doing something else with your hands, but two, like you're using your body. You're keeping it focused on being present in that moment and working through that emotion and working through that regulation or that temptation. Excuse me. I think that's really important. You have to get every aspect of your being into it: your mind, your body, your spirit. And when you can integrate all of that at the same time, that allows you to truly like step into the moment and be present and be able to let go of it and move on from it. Like that's really cool. I like that.
I will put this on our website after this. If you want to get this video and actually see what I'm doing, go ahead, familiesgettinghelp.com. Look at our homepage. There's going to be a place for you to drop your email and get a copy of this video sent to you.
Erin, I love the way you phrased all this. It's very compelling. And in my own experiences, a lot of the somatic and like subconscious work that I have done has been the most powerful. Obviously, there's top-down things as well. But I just really appreciate those perspectives. If someone is out there in podcast land listening to you and is like, hey, hypnotherapy kind of seems like a cool thing and wants to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
If people want to get in touch with us and see what our program's about, just get on our website at familiesgettinghelp.com. You can get a little more familiar with what we do and book your discovery call there with our client services manager, Mark. Something to know, our office is based out of St. George, Utah, but we do more Zoom sessions than we see people in person for sure. So Zoom works great, and I'm just as connected and in touch with a Zoom client as I am one-on-one in the office.
Erin, thank you for hopping on with us. It was great to speak with you.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure speaking with you both.
If you would like to get a discount on services with Erin at familiesgettinghelp.com, you can use the code Unashamed at checkout. Find us on social media at Unashamed Unafraid, become an outsider on unashamedunafraid.com, and get access to the bonus content to hear Erin share how she uses hypnotherapy to work with couples. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, continue to live unashamed.